What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Cheeky Midweeky, where you know what we're doing. We are making strength and conditioning not boring, and we're highlighting the practitioners in the field that make the field what it is. And we got a legend today. If you do not know Uncle Bob Alejo, you are whether you're going to admit it or not, you're one of the reasons that people like myself and everybody else has this profession. So first of all, thank you for coming on. And second of all, thank you for blazing the trails, because if nobody else will say it, I'll say it. I appreciate what you did for this profession.
Wow, that's a great and humbling intro. I appreciate that more than anything, more than the medals and the rings and the watches. These days that's what I'm all about. Still pushing to accomplish some things. I don't really don't have anything left to prove, but I sure got plenty to accomplish. Plenty to accomplish, and what you just talked about is my vision, my goal, my quest.
I mean, I still remember when I called in on one of, I think it was the virtual CVASP, and you and Jay were talking, and I got to ask
Oh
a
yeah.
question, and I was like blown away. I was like, this is so cool. I get to ask these guys a question live, like, because you were probably one of the first that I knew of that were in the high performance role as a strength coach, like as just
Yeah.
solely an overview of a department and didn't have a team. Like, that is the goal. Like, that's what it should be all about.
Well, it's funny you should mention that because that's something that I just recently looked at another post, and our good friend Joe Kent even mentioned something about it too, and said, certainly you agree with me on this, and you're right. I was really blessed to have Mike Izzy, who was an athlete for me at UCLA back in the early '80s, and he became the athletic director, and something we talked about for a long time, and became a senior staff member, and essentially plugged in the high performance model, which is commonly spoke of today. I think it's the most effective performance and health delivery system that's available. Now you got to get the right people to operate it, right? But
Yeah.
but the system itself is great, and I was fortunate to take that spot, and I really felt like at some point I'd be able to create something for folks like me, and hopefully, you don't have to wait till you're 60 years old to get that job, but that finally said, hey, I want to have a bigger reach, or I want to change my focus on the profession, or what, and then put yourself in a seat where it's exactly where we always talk about, somewhere where you have a seat at the table and a voice. It's got to happen, both of those. And when you're a senior associate athletic director, you're you're speaking for the athletic director, and so that's something that's going to have some impact. And unfortunately, what I've seen over the last 5 years is those positions have been maintained in some areas, but in some areas dropped. Just they just decided that money should have been spent somewhere else, which is an absolutely an absurd thought.
Yep.
Um, and we're also seeing it plugged in a way that's not even effective. You're having people with communications background and business background and finance background running that area. I mean, again, the absurdity reaches a level that makes you speechless. But I'm glad you mentioned that. I think it's something that can still happen, and I talked about it yesterday. It was really not sent at any one thing, but it was a post by James Madison University, allied, integrated, all the 7 other words that are out there at every other place, and health and performance. And the requirement was must have a master's in athletic training.
Huh.
And to which I say, that's a disservice to the student athletes, and frankly, a disservice to the athletic trainers to narrow that down into that box. To think nobody else could do that is not only an embarrassment, but it's thoughtless. Uh, and I think there's plenty of people out there, from strength coaches, uh, PTs, athletic trainers, certainly too, um, exercise physiologists who are specializing in an area, particularly nutrition, where I think the best nutritionists
Mm.
are PhD exercise physiologists. I mean, these guys have a grasp about the total concept. And, I mean, I could talk about that all day long. I don't want to spend too much time on it, but they're the position is really posing. It doesn't make any sense. Like, think about this. Let me ask, this is the question you would ask, or you see it, like whoever gets announced or named or the new position gets, brought up, and God bless them for doing it. But let's say, student athlete health and performance and welfare and well-being and whatever other things you want to, duplicate is so important to us here that we felt like we need to hire a communications expert, a business expert, a finance expert to handle that really important part of student athlete welfare. I mean, that's a joke. That's a joke. So thank you for allowing me to rant and not answer your question, but or at least be grateful. And I am grateful that you noticed that. And I just hope that thing turns around a little bit, and maybe I can get back into it at some point. In college athletics, that face has changed a little bit too. So there's some things and nuance there, but I think it's a super important position. And not only and am I biased? No, I'm not biased. I am pensive and prudent when I say I think strength and conditioning professionals are the best qualified applicant for that job.
Yep.
Not the only, but the
Right.
best. Not because I am one, I am, but you look at how we cross pollinate. But that again is not to say that somebody else couldn't handle the job, but to say like, I want a strength and conditioning professional for this. That's not right either. So
one of the questions that I have for you then based off that is, do you even think that it's possible for that world of high performance manager to exist in college athletics with the trend of NLI and what college football has become? Because you're now just working for the head coach, and once the head coach makes the amount of money that they make, they're essentially the most powerful person at the school.
Well, I don't think there's any question about that. Well, look, I mean, one of the questions I got asked, and it's not an easy answer. Somebody says, okay, great. You, Bob, or you like, people like you with your background, are the perfect candidate for that job. Now, who's going to hire you?
Correct.
And I say, well, as Tony La Russa used to say, that's the turd in the buttermilk. like, in the mornings we get down there and get to go over our schedule for the day in spring training. He'd say, sit back and go, all right, where's the turd in the buttermilk here? Well, that's it. I mean, who hires who? And I do have an answer for that now after thinking about it for a while, but you have to have an incredible backbone as an athletic director. And frankly, I don't see that strength being exhibited as much as it used to, right? I mean, they're fearful that somebody's going to say something. They're fearful of Title IX. They're fearful of somebody being uncomfortable or, offended. And so they back away on that, having to make the judgment. It's difficult. It's a wide landscape, but just I think what we have to remember here, and I was talking to somebody about this, I tell you exactly who it was, Rob Butler, who's a fantastic PT, CSCS, who was leading the way at St. Louis in their organization, the Cardinals, for a while, and was at Duke and helped us out with some testing while I was at North Carolina State. It just reminded me to tell him, like, people get fearful of that position, Justin, and I'll tell you why. Because they think, oh, Justin's going to come in here and tell us what to do. And that couldn't be farther from the truth. That's
Amen.
not the model.
Nope.
The model is that of facilitation. I'm coming in, I'm the high performance director. I go to Justin as a practitioner and I say, what do you need? How can I help you? I'm your first line of defense. Make sure you come to me first. I'm not telling you what to do. Now, I think somebody should have an above average knowledge of all those places, which now includes, thankfully, the mental and clinical aspect of health, right? Which is fantastic. But I think the number one quality, and I put this in a LinkedIn post the other day, the number one quality is leadership. You need a leader, somebody who can take the masses, and the masses will follow them. That's what you need somebody to lead, because really the high performance model is about communication. That's all it is. It's about ensuring communication and therefore accountability. All right. Communication, lines of communications up and down, and you have a reporting line. And that's, people think it's, oh, well, no. When I say it's a reporting line, that means that now, Justin, you're in charge of analytics. Nothing happens unless it goes through you. You're supervising that. So I'm the director. You're in another system. I say, that's it. Now I've empowered you. I've not taken the power from you.
Nope.
I've made you
Yep.
powerful.
Mm-hmm.
And anything that comes outside of that is wrong because that's not our system. Now you have the NIL in there, and I'll tell you, to me, the biggest thing the NIL does now, Justin, is it stops development. And I think we've seen that, for instance, in basketball right now at the college level. More college coaches, more college basketball coaches are looking for strength and conditioning coaches who have a professional background. Because of course everybody in Division I basketball is going to play pro basketball, so why not have that, right? So they want somebody that can have that sort of, how do we keep these kids here? Well, we have a strength coach that was in the NBA and was overseas or whatever like that, and so that they're moving that way because there's no more 4-year periodization, really. I mean, it's rare, right? So you got to take what you got and mold it right now, and so that's really the effect that I saw for us in physical development is periodization is really not something that's as much a powerful tool as it used to be because it's one and gone and one and gone and not to the pros. It's one and I'm going to another school.
That's a good point. And you talked about the athletic director. And if any of our listeners are out there wondering, like, because you saw so closely working with an athletic director, what does it take from what you've seen to become an athletic director? And is there even a path for strength coaches to become athletic directors? Because you got to be the senior associate and we now have young strength coaches as assistant athletic directors. Is there a path that they could become an athletic director? And if so, what does that even look like? I can't hear you right now. I don't know why.
We're athletic directors are interested in building a brand new archway into the tennis center. It's one of those things. And if you look at some of these bios, these new guys that come in, it's all about them. Look what I did. Well, this guy did this there, and I did that there, and all of a sudden, it's you're going to get your next spot. But it really, and it's not any fault of anybody's other than the NLI is part of it. But there's so much money. I mean, you people think there's some sort of competitive thought process or
Taking a quick break from the show to talk to you about our membership site. If you find value from our podcast, you are guaranteed to find more value inside of the Strength Coach Network video library inside the membership. Doesn't matter the level coach you are, you can see all of our 170 plus lectures sorted 3 different ways. Based on the level of expertise coach you are, aspiring, established, or head, you can sort it by every sport imaginable, and you can sort it by every topic in strength and conditioning. This makes all of the content consumable, easy for you and for your staff members to be able to deep dive on any topic in strength and conditioning. Click the link down below to try the site out for 24 hours for only $1. Then your membership turns into a monthly membership where the price is less than $30 a month for $29.99, which is less than going out to dinner by yourself. You have access to all of this content. Click the link down below.
Athletic directors are being circumspect, saying, well, if we go forward with this, we'll join the Big 12 and we'll do this and that. It's all about money. I mean, shoot, the top 30 schools are all in debt, all of them. And this is going to keep growing. Frankly, I'd like to get their banker, where I don't have to pay anything back. There's schools that are 20, 30, $40 million in the hole, I think. How's that happen anywhere? Geez, I'm looking at my car out there and I'm like, I need a couple $100 just for next month's payment, for Christ's sakes. These guys are, so I don't know what to do. I don't know. I don't want to block myself in here. I was going to say, I don't know that any of us in the strength and conditioning profession are prepared for that.
Gotcha.
Because we want to be integrated with people. We want contact. We want to be in and out and making this communication and this back and forth. I don't think it's happening anymore at that athletic director level, and where they're going to show up at your practice or the weight room or really get to know who you are like they used to in the old days. So I don't know what that path would be, honestly.
You talked about finance right there, and that was something that you, myself, and Dillman were talking about at the coaches conference, and that was kind of something you
Right.
said that you wanted to really, really harp on. What was kind of on your heart then and on your heart now about the topic of finances and strength coaches, because it doesn't get talked about enough.
Shoot, we batted around a lot of stuff that other day, didn't we? Sitting
Oh
around
yeah.
there talking. When I think of finances, I think of salaries, and when I think of salaries, I think about something that is difficult and rarely discussed as a strength coach. We're not really good at that because that's not what we do, and we should be. Um, and you got to start talking about your work, but there's a little balance there, right? And this goes back to the same old, the posts and the conversations you hear about, you know, don't take that $30,000 job. That's not right. You have a degree and you should be paid more than that. And my response to that is, do you think nobody's going to take that? If you don't take it, somebody will. It's so. It, I think it's a little bit uh, selfish to say that out loud. I mean, especially knowing that someone my age, which is, I don't know if anybody is my age doing it anymore, but let's say somewhere around there, we were working for, five, six, $7,000 a year. My first job was $10,000 at UCLA, only 10 months, no guarantees, no benefits. Now that's not unusual for those times, right? So what are you going to do? Because if I don't take it, somebody else will. So what are you going to do? I mean, this isn't like med school, for Christ's sakes. I mean, think about it. What? And by the way, nobody owes you a job. That's your choice. There's nothing that's whatever, right? There's nothing that guarantees you. Oh, I'm going to get my degree in exercise physiology and make $100,000. Well, you might, but if there's somebody that'll take it for 70, then you're watching him do his job while you're just wondering what the hell happened. So I think the biggest thing is to learn how to discuss finances and learn how to compare, gather enough information to show up in a room. Because what's the oldest argument? I don't get paid enough. What's the oldest argument for administration? We pay you too much. All right. So you got to be prepared for that. And you got to go in and here's a list of guys that are like me. I'll tell you exactly the way I look at it is like baseball, right? And if you're a second baseman, you have a year that has your average and your whatever. You just don't come up with some arbitrary figure, and certainly neither does your agent. He's going to come in there, and so is the organization. Look at all the second basemen and see where you fit. The rest is just emotion and what we think about you and all that, right? So there's what you think you're worth, there's what they think you're worth, and then there is what exactly you are worth. And somewhere in there, you got to bat that around a little bit. But you need to come in there and be prepared. I think oftentimes we're just unprepared. We don't have, we have all this data on bench presses and sprints and acceleration, but then we show up and try to get a salary and we ain't got nothing. Like I want more money. No shit. you know, like so. I think that the financial part of it is it's got to be talked more now. And then of course we do have a separation, right? You got your Division I football schools
Yeah.
and those coaches, and then you have all the Olympic sports. I mean, there's a vast difference in those salaries, and for a good reason, right? I mean, there's some more money applied to football and basketball. I still think I'd really like to see these coaches who are making 5, 6, $7 million a year, not a bunch of them, but it's a couple, kind of hold the flag a little bit for some of those people at the Olympic sport level. I mean, in a common sense way. I don't think there's going to be a director of Olympic sports making $500,000 anytime soon. Um, but I think that given again the hours and the passion and the input and the effort that we give is going to have to bring something up. But I'd like to see somebody with, who's really making a good salary, really promote some of these younger coaches, and not necessarily younger coaches, I'm sorry, but the Olympic side to get a little bit of boost. I mean, there's still guys down there making 30, 40, 50 grand,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and loving it. And I don't mind it. But I think there's, at that level, I mean, you get a 10% raise, that's a lot of money, right? 5% is a lot of money,
Right?
crying out loud. So I think that's going to be different. And, as this football and basketball thing grow and the NLI, I mean, more and more money is going to be pushed that way. My fear is that money that's being used in the Olympic sports at some point, it may not be able to be sustainable. Say, sorry, tennis, golf, or you need to put that into football. I mean, if you really want tennis and golf here, football's got to have that money.
No, you're right, and I've seen that sometimes where they fund it through that because of what those sports are able to bring in revenue wise. When you talk about the $1 million coaches, do you
Mm-hmm.
think that there should be more of them, considering how much time we spend with them? And if you want to talk that, offensive and defensive coordinators make what they make, if you're the strength and conditioning coordinator, I don't think you need to be making the 2-3 million because you're not recruiting. And that's the hardest part about what a position coach does is recruit. Do you think the $1 million as a full-time salaried strength coach in football is extreme? If not, what do you think?
Well, I think it goes back to what I said earlier. It's what you're worth.
Yeah,
It's what
it's
you
what they're
think
going to
you're
pay
worth.
you. Yeah.
What they think you're worth. And finally, we used to see all this BS flying around earlier. Well, he's the most valuable coach on our staff, and that's why we pay him $100,000.
Right? Or the culture
Uh,
starts in the weight room, but you're making 20K.
yeah. I mean, and then you say, well, we can easily measure that because your staff has got the linebacker coach and the D. We can look at all those, and I don't make as much as them. And you just said publicly in your conference that your media presser that, oh, he's the most important coach. Well, pay me like that then, and now we're seeing that, and which is good. And because if that's how you, I mean, again, that's if that's how you feel, that's how you feel. That you're the head coach, you get to run the ship. So if you think that's the place where the money needs to be spent, good. So I think it's really based on what your system is and how you want to run it. So I can't put a cost on that. I mean, apparently Harbaugh thought that was important, and the guys at Oklahoma State thought that was important,
Yeah.
and I think Alabama's up that way somewhere. Dave Ballou. I mean, somebody felt that was important, and so that's I can't. I'm not going to deny anybody making a good salary. I mean, shoot, uh, but I think it does. It does. I'll tell you what it does do. Every time those guys get a salary raise, everybody else does too. And that's what I'm saying. That's why it'd be important for them to kind of. And I know that there's a separation now. Sometimes these departments they don't ever talk. I mean, I've called football coaches to go, hey, did you talk to so and so in the Olympic department? Like, no, I haven't. I've never seen him, or I never see her. I never haven't talked to him in a couple of years. So, but that doesn't mean you're not for the profession. And I remember, I remember Troy Aikman, so this is years ago when he got drafted. There was this thing called, I don't know if you remember, you might be too young, the quarterbacks club that Lee Steinberg formed. So it was Warren Moon, Dan Marino, all the best. They started their own business. They had their own jackets, and it was really cool. And so Troy gets drafted. He goes out there, and he's like, I'm a little nervous. I'm making all this money. I haven't even thrown a pass. Like wow, all these guys. And when he came, he was a golf tournament, and he came back to school, I think, or I saw him somewhere. I can't remember. I said, "Well, how was it?" He goes, "Oh, it was great." We talked a little bit. How was it with the other stuff? He said, "Well, as soon as he walks in there, Dan Marino comes right up to him, sticks his hand out, and says, 'Hey, Troy, welcome to the club. Make as much money as you can because it's good for all of us.'" And that's the piece. I think guys are scared to tell people how much they make. Well, I don't want to say because then I'm going to get in trouble. Bull, that's crap. I remember when I got into baseball the first, and we started trying to get salaries for the strength coaches in baseball. Guys wouldn't fill it out. Like just put it on a blank piece of paper, write it on toilet paper. I don't care. Just hand it in so I can see we can get a grip on this, right? There's like 12 guys in the room when we first started, and seriously, and 10 pieces of paper get handed in. I'm like, come on, seriously, two guys aren't going to hand in a piece of paper. Like, well, my ball club doesn't want anybody to know what I make. I said, you damn right. They don't want you to know what those other guys make because you're getting the shaft. So, if you have a big salary, report it because it's good for everybody. If you're embarrassed by your salary, report it so we can get this thing moving, right? So I think that's where this is. You got to get more. I mean, again, talking about the uncomfortability, Justin, of talking about salary. You got to be able to say when people say, "How much do you make?" Oh, it's funny when and I know you've seen this, right? So what is your salary? I'm around 200. Oh, you really don't know what you make? Is that what you're telling me? Of course you tell me what you make. I mean, it's a joke. So I think you're worth what you're worth. I mean, we've seen that, and there seems to be plenty of money, although that money seems to be a little bit better uh, handed out with the football, basketball groups at the D1 level.
So anybody listening right now, he's talking about a Hall of Famer, Troy Aikman, and I mean, talking about baseball, like you've been around a lot. I'm not going to box you in on just one thing, but what has been like the top athletic, freakiest, just most impressive things you've seen in your career? Top 3, 5, whatever come to your mind.
Wow, that's an interesting question. It's funny. The first thing that pops in my head is the baseball thing, which is not because of baseball itself. It's because of how it happened. It's my Ricky Henderson story.
Ooh,
That
I mean, come on now. What?
that hasn't been totally corroborated. Howard Bryant, who's a really good friend of mine, writer, former ESPN guy, and wrote a book about Ricky, and he couldn't get anybody to corroborate the story, but came pretty close. I'm thinking that's how I remember it. So Ricky had a day off. He was going to DH, he was going to lead off, right? So I come downstairs and I'm watching the first inning because being around Tony wanted everybody on the bench for the first pitch. So we're watching the game, and all of a sudden Tony says to me, Tony's always like he's in the third inning, on the first pitch. He's like, figuring this whole thing out. And he looks at me and he says, "Have you seen Rico?" And I said, "Nah, he was upstairs last night. I seen him." He's like, "Oh, all right." So now there's 2 outs, all right. And he's like, "Hey, might go find out where Ricky is." Like, oh shit, like it's coming time. So I go running upstairs to look for him, and the place is empty. There's nobody in the clubhouse. So I go looking around. I go in the bathroom. Well, he's in there. So I said, "Rico," and he's like, "Yeah." I said, "Dude, the inning's almost over, and you're leading off." He's like, "Oh man." So you hear. So there's tile in the bathroom, right? And you can hear the spikes, click, 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 click. And he goes, "Go to my locker, get my Oakleys and grab my bats." And I said, "Okay, I'll see you downstairs." So I go down. By the time I get downstairs, the team's changing. Pitcher's out there throwing his 8 warm-ups, and Tony's looking at me like, "What's going on?" I go, I don't know. So I go running back. I go looking up. So in the Coliseum, there's these huge steps that go up to the clubhouse. So I'm at the bottom, and I'm watching Ricky. He's coming down the steps, pulling his pants up like this, jumping down the steps, comes all the way down, and as he gets down to the bottom, the announcer, who's an icon, has now since passed. The leadoff hitter, number 24, Ricky Henderson. So Ricky comes down, he grabs a couple of bats and shakes them, like just checks them out, puts his helmet on, goes out there, gets in the box, first pitch, boom, gone. No warm up, no nothing. The guys that warm up, like when Tony gives guys a day off, he lets them just say, "Don't worry about it. Just show up at game time." And because especially with a guy like Ricky or the older guys, Tony's really good with that because he lets them get prepared as veterans. He didn't warm up. He didn't do anything. He just walked right out, down the stairs, hopped in the box, one swing, boom, gone.
That's unbelievable.
That to me, and I've seen, Reggie Miller, Jackie Joyner, Mike Powell. I mean, his names just get crazy at UCLA those 10 years I was there. That's got to be one of the greatest feats of athleticism I've ever seen.
I mean, they say hitting a baseball is the hardest thing to do. So if he just did it after coming from the bathroom with no warm up, right?
I couldn't believe it. I'd never seen anything like it. There's been lots of stuff like that. I mean, I've seen, John Brenner, who was a world-class shot putter, 70-footer, and best in the world at some point. I spotted him he squatted 743. He was going for a single. And I mean, he made that Alico bar look like licorice. It was just like like that. But he said, we're gonna go for one, right? So I'm behind him, like I'm gonna grab him, right? So but there's guys on the ends, and So he goes back and he goes down and up and he gets it, right? And so I go to guide him into the rack, and all of a sudden he goes, "I'm going again." I'm like, oh shit! And he goes down, boom! He comes popping back up again, and he puts the bar in the rack, and he turns around, he's got blood coming out of his nose and everything. Like, oh,
Quick break from the show to remind you to hit that like and subscribe button so that way you get notifications of when more content like this gets released. So click that like and subscribe button, and with that, let's get back to the show.
now that was impressive to me because as a former competitive lifter or lifter in general, like just like you know what it's like to say I'm going for one or I'm going for two. You don't just do it and say, "Oh, I'm going to do another." He just said, "I'm going again." That's another one that I thought was pretty good. There's plenty of cool instances. By and large, when I was at UCLA during those years, it was just a phenomenal run of at the time, some of the greatest athletes in the world, certainly in track and field. And I mean, literally every sport we have somebody who eventually became an icon worldwide. Reggie Miller in basketball, Kobe Jones on the soccer field, Jackie Joyner, Mike Powell, Kevin Young, all world record holders. Tom Jager, 50-yard record holder in the freestyle. I mean, it's crazy, how many. And I really was exposed for the first time at an elite level of athlete. So it wasn't just like the best college player. I mean, every one of those people end up going, including baseball. Todd Zeal, Mike McNaughty, Hamlin, Jeff Conine. I mean, tons of great players.
So how do you handle hearing any strength coach that might be younger and they don't understand the background, and they might how do you, when you've seen that level of excellence, how do you relate to other coaches? Because that's a once in a lifetime opportunity to be around those type of athletes. How do you handle coaching people that aren't like that when you or coaching the coaches that didn't have that same experience? Because that is just unbelievable.
It really is. Well, the first thing I can tell you that I don't toss around the word elite at all, ever, because it's, you see it way too much, and there's not that many elite athletes in the world. They're just
Right.
not.
Just like the word GOAT is thrown around too much.
Yeah. Right. And so, when I think about elite, I think about best in the world because if elite's top of the top, it's the best in the world. And, when you say, oh, this guy, you just pick a sport, oh, he's an elite athlete. Well, he might be elite in his sport in America, but he's not elite. I mean, it's hard to, I make sure people understand, that's not what that is. You really have to respect that term to see what it actually looks like. And again, when I look back at being able to walk out to the first curve at Drake Stadium. That's how far the weight room was from the track. It was, well, I don't know, 40-yard. I saw the world's greatest track athletes out there, and I see what that looks like, and you just can't imagine it when you see it. But here's the other thing: what it's not.
Yes.
Right. And so I think that's the two things that you really get out of that. I don't really, I think the biggest thing is to make sure that you don't spend a lot of time looking at other athletes and what they do. Your focus has got to be present right here with this woman or man and what make them better. You can't really look down there. You got to make them better, which is why all this tracking stuff is great in the tech and all that. I believe in it. I like it. At the same time, you can't say, "Hey, what are those other guys doing?" What's going on in the, what killed me was early on with soccer, because soccer in Europe was really doing a lot of that stuff way before we were.
Yep.
And some of the soccer coaches were taking a look at, Bundesliga or Premier League data, and I said, "Oh, we don't have a guy here that can run water out to a freaking Premier League player. Why are we looking at the distances and times? It's just ridiculous."
Yeah, you got to worry about your own team like that. That's when we first got GPS at Towson, the head football coach was like, "Oh, how does this compare to other teams?" I'm like, "Bro, I'm not giving you any recommendations right now. We're just collecting data on what you do and what we do. It doesn't matter. Like, it's got to be us."
Right. No, I mean there's no other way to do it. And the data thing is important. The most important thing about gathering data is to make your data better.
Ooh,
That's it.
ooh,
It's not about
yes.
comparing data. It's making your data, and you want them to bench X amount of weight. And it's going to be some time before we're going to see that, right? Well, you can't leap over that. You can't take the elevator to the penthouse. You've got to hit every one of those floors. So what's the virtue in looking at that? The way I look at it is, I think it's curious. It's interesting, but it means nothing to me. Nothing. And here's what they don't get about it. And don't get me started on data because you're going to run out of
Oh, I just
battery,
got you started. I just got you
and,
started. Go with it.
and your headphones are going to fall off, and you know
No, I'm dialed in. What do you got?
I'm going to get grayer as we saw it. Well, I mean, the thing you forget about the data is that if we both have a tracking system, whatever, who knows, heart rate, whatever, we both have those systems. And then I want to compare their load. Let me just make it real simple, their load to my load. Okay. Well, the data doesn't, it's just a toy. There's nothing, it doesn't do anything on its own. It's going to collect all this stuff. Whatever you tell it to do, it's going to collect all this stuff. And then you say, okay, well, their data is different than ours. And I say, well, you're only just looking at the numbers. Here's what's really different: our room, our coaches, our scheme,
Yes.
our climate, our grass, our turf. There's all this other stuff that you have to add in if you really want to do it. And everybody talk about, oh, we took a deep dive. Dude, you're diving in the 3-foot pool. You're not doing any diving at all. You just busted your neck on that 3-foot dive. You're missing all the good stuff. So that's the thing that I think we're missing for sure. There, on top of the, so this is the way I say it, and I said this years ago, and Catapult, Vald, whatever they're great companies, and like I say, I like it. I think it gets me closer to certainty. That's what we want, right? I want to get as close to certain as we can because nothing really is certain in life and training and whatever. You can't really be certain too much. So I like it. But it doesn't do anything. Like my son, I could tell my son, here, take this catapult. I want you to look at Justin Lima right here. Take those numbers and give them to me. He can do that. He doesn't need any, 5-day in service to do that. He does it in Minecraft. you know. But what it is it's operator error. I mean, think about this now. Think about this hard. Of all the time that you know about and all the time I know about in performance, there's never been more technology, more depth of understanding of biomechanics, kinematics, kinetics, and physiology than ever before. Still, to this very day, we've not seen any significant difference in injury reduction at all. Zero. And I say zero. Somebody said, "Well, last year we reduced our injury." Yeah, that could be just white noise. Let's take a look at it over 5, 7, 8 years, right? But we haven't seen anything. It's the practitioner. It's operator error. Look, it's like a toaster. You put toast in the toaster and burn it, that's your fault. It ain't the toaster's fault.
Yeah, don't blame that. Or like the car. If you get in an accident, don't blame the car.
Exactly. And so that's what just befuddles me. Like, how are you guys not figuring this out? Well, again, the deep dive. Everybody's looking for that 1%. Let's look at the fascicle and the Golgi
Right.
tendon body. And I'm like, well, the Golgi tendon body would be good if that guy could squat worth of crap. I mean, you can't. That's not even a. Nobody would consider that a clean. I mean, you'd have to stretch the definition for that to actually be a lunge. When you look at it, like let's do the basic things. Those things still make you hit the homer, right? I mean, you can make 50% gains on those things, and you're looking for that one little 1%, ATP. Come on, dude, it gets boring.
Was it baseball that did it because of Moneyball and the movie and analytics? Because baseball had always had the biggest track record, or was it the fact that teams in Europe were doing it? Like, what drove it then, in your opinion?
Well, I mean, in baseball, it was, I mean, essentially, I was there for it. It was Billy Beane and what we did in Oakland, started all that stuff in motion. But it was happening in other places, mostly in Europe, and nobody really grabbed onto it. Because baseball was really one of those intuitive sports, right? I mean, I know this guy hasn't gotten a hit in a while, but I feel like he's going to get one today, type of thing. And let's be clear about intuition, right? It's not a crystal ball thing. Intuition is a background of experiences that happen like that. You see, they just flashes in front of you, right? It's that same thing that lets you know, like, I'm going to take a whack at this, right? Boom, and you get it. It's not just something that you just, falls out of the air and hits you in the head like an acorn, like, oh, I think I'll go bench press this, it's not like that. And so intuition is a valuable part. In fact, Catapult may have got a little pissed at me. I was one of the keynotes at the basketball one, like 150 years ago. But I said, here's the thing. The best results are science, intuition, and common sense. You have to have all three of those. If you don't have all three of those, you're done. Intuition, common sense, and science. You can't do it without the science, but you also can't do it without the intuition, because the science are just numbers, and the numbers don't have heartbeats. They don't have lives. So once you understand that, then it comes into the common sense piece. Right? Like some of the things we're seeing now, people are debating about these common exercises, and exercises have been around forever. Somebody finally just said, okay, let's just not worry about the science for a minute. Just look at that. Does that really look like that makes sense? And now all of a sudden we find out it doesn't, right? And so you just go, oh, okay. But that's going to be backed by the science. That's going to be backed by the science in the end. So, yeah, I mean, I love technology and I love data, because it gets me closer to certainty. And that's what we all want to do. We want to be as close as we can to making sure we make the right move. Not for me, but for you. Yep. When I'm training you, I want it to be the best for you. But it's important to understand all those other things that are involved. Otherwise, it's just a huge mistake. It's not going to be fundamentally sound, and in the end, it's just a waste of time. And I think today I've seen it more times than I've not seen it. People are just gathering as much data and doing all this testing and not doing a damn thing with it. Nothing. Zero.
I agree with that. And do you think that with the more and more profession, like the applied sports science roles, do you think that that's eventually it's going to eventually work itself out, where people are going to become better and better educated on it? Or where do you see this thing going in the next 5 years? If you did, like, and I know we can't predict it, but like, where do you just see the field of strength and conditioning going?
Well, I think it's evolved. It's evolved out a little bit, right? Because in the beginning, we were the data scientists. We were the tracking systems. We were big data. Somebody says, it's big data. And I'm thinking, was data ever not big? I mean, even though we were taking average squats and deadlifts and stuff, I mean, it was still important. I mean, I wasn't taking it, for my health. It was something that's going to help me prescribe, right? And create programs. So I think it's, we did all that. We were the nutritionists. We were all of it, right? And then all of a sudden, these things became a little more specific and more
fractionalized.
There's more expertise in those areas, right? We knew it where it became too heavy. It became too heavy for all of us to do it, which is fine. But at the same time, I think if you're not paying attention to all that, and listen. It's not that big a deal to be up on the latest nutrition or the biomechanics and all. And I think most strength conditioning coaches are. I don't think the contrary is true in the other disciplines. But I think you have to, the more value is for you to know that when somebody in the sports science or somebody in rehabilitation or some nutrition is telling you something that's not true, you need to know about that. You need to be able to discern that, because listen, here's what happens to these people who have the fear, right? Like, that's my job. You're doing my job now. You trying to do my job, and I say, no, I'm not trying to do your job, but you need to help me do mine. And, I'm not going to get yelled at because you're not giving my athlete the best nutrition, or I'm not going to get yelled at because that rehab was really bad. And you said, no, he's ready to go. And so I set him up on the ready to go program and he got re-injured. So it's not that I want to do your job. I want you to help me do mine, or we're going to have a problem. That's how it should be.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's people. I mean, this is a guy that has the amount of expertise that you've and the different jobs and places that you've had, like kind of mind blowing. For anybody that doesn't know, give them the quick version of your background. From
Oh
how
gosh.
you started to, you mentioned the fact starting off at $10,000, but like,
Yeah.
how has your role evolved from everywhere, even with stops at Powerlift and the final role at Cal State Northridge?
Well, so this is my 42nd year in coaching. Um, I started out at UCLA in '84. Well, that's not true. I started out in Chico when I graduated from Chico State, California State University, Chico, Northern California, about 100 miles north of Sacramento. Fantastic education and background to play baseball and go to school. I was a director there, an assistant at some point with a hospital-based sports medicine center, and that's where I kind of started coaching. And then I took over the football team at my school, and then from there in '84 I got a job. Spent 10 years at UCLA, and in those 10 years we ended up winning 22 national championships across all sports. Absolutely the most dominant school at the time. Um, Football, basketball. I mean, funny story. Football, we ended up setting a New Year's Day bowl game record, but then I think there was only like 7 bowls.
Yeah,
Now
right.
there's 107 bowls. Let's see. From there, I went to the Oakland A's for almost 10 years. '93, I went to the A's. I was their first. I did a lot of firsts. I know that. I was talking to somebody else about that. So I was the first assistant strength coach in UCLA history.
Jeez.
Then we moved. Then in my 7th year, we separated football and Olympic sports, and I became the director of all Olympic sports and the administrator of the room. So we were the first school in history to separate football and everybody else. Then I went to the Oakland A's and became their first strength coach in Oakland A's history. And did that for 10 years. Of course, that ran into 10 years, 93 to 2001. Ran that into Moneyball, so I was part of that. And that was exciting. Again, something that we built. Took about 4 years off, went with Jason Giambi to the Yankees, and started a website, wrote a book, stayed there for a while, and then came back to UC Santa Barbara and was a director at Santa Barbara for 4 years. 2005 to 2008. 2008 was on my first Olympic team as an Olympic team member. So I'm pretty sure I was the first strength coach to be on the Olympic team, not just somebody who was coaching somebody and went, but I got the jacket and everything else to walk, but we had to play too early the next day, so I didn't take that trip. Here's a great story. So we ended up losing to Latvia in the first round. We're world champions, and then Phil Dalhouser and Todd Rogers go, and we play and so there's they have a tournament and then they play the games, right? So they have a round robin, 3 matches. We lose to Latvia, arguably the worst team on the face of the earth.
What's up, strength coaches? Want to take a quick break from the show to talk to you about our sponsor, TeamBuildr. TeamBuildr is your one-stop shop for online training platform needs as a coach. With TeamBuildr, you're going to be able to program for your athletes whether they're in person or remote. Using TeamBuildr, not only will you be able to program for your athletes, but there are special features such as the leaderboard and locking training with wellness questionnaires. With the leaderboard, you can have an exercise performed that day, whether it be a lift, a sprint, or a jump, and scores can be updated in real time and projected on a TV in the training. Wellness questionnaires can be used at the beginning of training, and your athletes will have to fill them out prior to being able to train. This ensures that as a coach, you're being able to collect quality data before the athletes train. So, if you're interested in TeamBuildr, click the link down below and find out more information. Let's get back to the show. taking a quick break from the show to talk to you about our newest sponsor, Hawkin Dynamics. Hawkin Dynamics builds and designs software and hardware for coaches, athletic trainers, sports scientists, and everybody in the high performance department. Most notably, their use of their force plates with the ease of transportation and ease of use. Not only did I use them when I was at Towson, but I've used them when I've moved back here to Iowa with Tucker at Goldfinch. So check out Hawkin Dynamics in the link down below. Now let's get back to the show.
And Phil Dalhauser, who's 6'9", is hitting the ball into the net. And I'm thinking, we didn't come to Beijing for this. Is unbelievable. Like, so we're like, so we come back and work out. And so my plan then was to work out after every match because I'm planning to play in the final, which we're going to be there for a month. So we're going to work out after every match. That way they can have the next day off. So, and then they can do whatever they want. So we're waiting in. Todd's there. It's like midnight Beijing time. Who knows what time it is everywhere in the world. So we're waiting. Phil's not there, right? And you could debate, the reason why we lost it, but really it was Phil that, hit a couple of balls into the net and things are like, god dang. And who eventually becomes the greatest player in the world in the decade, his era. And so finally he comes in late. Sorry, guys. Like, okay. All right, look, what are we going to do here? So we're going to have to get going. So I end up finding out that what happened was, so when you go to the Olympic Games and you walk in the procession, the one that we all see on TV, there's a chute that you can head off to, and then they'll take you back to the village or wherever you are, because otherwise you have to stand out there for 3 hours. There's no sitting. Well, Phil missed the turnoff. And so come to find out, he goes, my legs were dead. And I go, how's that possible, man? I'm looking at this. He goes, I missed the turnoff, and we were out there standing for 3 hours. I go, okay. So in 2012, when we come to London, no walking in the thing. All right, let's get going. And then we just dominated the rest of the tournament. So 2008, then Billy Bean called me back to the A's in 2008. And I went back, and then 2011, I went to North Carolina State, became their first director in history there. So I was over everything, including football, which they hadn't had before. And of course, football did that. I was managing that. And then went to London, 2012 games, didn't do so well there for my second time. And then from there, came to CSUN as the Senior Socio-Athletic Director for Student Athlete Welfare and Performance, and plugged in the high performance model, a la Mike Izzy, who was our former track athlete, and our AD, who was completely supportive in that area. Really changed what we wanted to do, not culture-wise, but I think the culture does change a little bit. And I'll go on record saying it because I've written it, that I think culture is a strong term for athletics. I don't know what you call it, but I think we all know what that means, so I'll use it in this context. But, there was a lot of people that said, I really don't think that's a good idea. And I'd say, well, that's what we're doing. Thanks for coming. So, we plugged things in the right way and got that communication line going. And after that, I ended up going to Dynamic Strength and Fitness, working with them until this past November. And now I am an assistant strength and conditioning coach with the Los Angeles Angels, and my good friend Ron Washington, the manager, who sat next to me all those years in Oakland. And he is one hell of a man. And he is, I will say this publicly, and I've said it before quietly and any other way, Ron Washington, and you can watch some videos of him. Ron Washington is the best coach of any sport I've ever seen. And I've seen some.
I'm about to say, that's some high praise. You've seen some people though.
I've been with him. I've been with him on some things. So like on Sunday mornings, we'd have these things called Kaiser Permanente clinics, right? So we wouldn't have batting practice, and it's a free clinic for fans or whoever to come. And there'd be like, well, I don't know, 50 fans out there. We divided them up into groups. Each coach had a station, grounders, pop flies, just a kind of it wasn't a clinic as much as it was kind of a fun day to get on the field, right, for these people. Well, I'd seen him take kids without a glove or flip-flops or whatever, turn them into fielders. It just like never done it before in their life. Like, oh my God, like it's crazy. And I continually watch this guy, but he's also somebody of great integrity. And I felt like I'm here in LA. He gets a job. I think things happen for a reason. There's no such thing as luck or happenstance.
Nope.
And he's here and I'm here. And I say, let's go. And he said, then we got to have you. Let's go. So they have a really good young director of strength and conditioning that was hired before Wash got the job. His name is Dylan Centula. Mark that down. I like him. He's not like a lot of the young coaches that I've ran into, and perhaps you too, that are fearful of somebody with experience. I mean, he's embraced what we're doing, and thankfully, this is an interesting. And I think you'll understand that. And I want the people who are listening to this to understand this when I say it. I've been with them now since November 20th. And him and I have talked almost every day. So he's a young 30-something guy and hasn't quite reached double digits in his coaching career. So
Wow.
So I'm there to help and mentor and do what he needs. But since then, I've never heard him say the term head strength and conditioning coach or assistant one time. He says it's just two guys working in the big leagues. That's the way I look at it. So
that's unbelievable. And like for me, hearing you talk about all of that, like how, I mean, you've done so much. So to still like keep having the itch, like, hey, bravo to you to keep doing it. But like, what continues to motivate you? Like that might be something that our listeners are asking. Like, what based off of all those, like nobody else would have known. Like, hey, you got to make a turn when you're at the Olympics. People would be like, what? But like you, like, what still drives you to do? Like, because you just took on a new role. Right now, anybody listening, this is less than three months old. Like,
yeah.
What pushes you to do what you do after everything you've achieved in your career?
I think I said it earlier, right? I think it's a safe statement to say I don't have anything left to prove in my career. I've left places better than when I arrived. I've got plenty of accomplishments, but I feel like plenty of achievements. But I got plenty to accomplish still, Justin. I mean, there's, I want to make Dylan a superstar. I want to make them. I want to have the effect on athletes. I mean, that's what we do. What we do is we help. We're fixers. Essentially, we're fixers. We're janitors. We come in and fix and clean it up.
You're right.
Right. And I continue to have the same passion, not only for the job, but for the profession. As you well know, I've been a huge advocate. I've been on the board of directors. I've been the vice president of the NSCA, and I'm not quiet about how I feel about the profession. I'm also as critical as anybody of why we are where we're at, right? And so I just think it's, I don't ever see myself moving off of it. It's just something that, I mean, I certainly have hobbies. I like to fish, I like to hunt. I took up the electric guitar for a little bit. Got back to that.
Here we go.
So I stopped that in 8th grade when I ended up playing 3 sports. So there's no time to do that. So I dropped it. My son ended up trying to pick it up here and decided. I said, "Give me that thing." I still have a few things I remember. So now I got my room right in there where I go in there and amp it up and go. So I definitely see myself being a rhythm guitarist in a band here pretty soon. No doubt.
That's like that. I don't know if anybody else listening to this is going to feel that way, but for me, hearing you say that, like, it's maybe a little bit of confirmation bias, but I don't ever see myself not working in athletics and coaching people either. So it's kind of nice to hear. It's like, yeah, man, like you're still just out there at that pace car. Like everybody's still just kind of like following you, like setting that example, man. So that's awesome to hear.
What a nice thing. Well, I enjoy it, and honestly, I also think, and you've seen me on social media, so I think that people need to be shown the best ways, or at least options, right? So I want to make sure when I see something that's wrong, I have to say something. I can't leave it alone. I just can't. And I look back at me, and I think this is what you can do too at some point, or even right now. I don't think about myself the way when you mention it. I'm certainly flattered, and It's accurate. I don't know what else to say other than that, but sometimes you have to look at your thing and say, man, that's a hell of a resume, right? You know, if
Yeah.
it wasn't me and somebody said, here, take a look at this, I go, whoa, you know, there's some shit right there. so, so when I see that, and I hear about when people speak or they write, my go-to phrase is, you know, be careful what you write because somebody might believe it. And I think a lot of times people don't think that far, or they actually think that what they're saying is right, which is even worse. So I can't let that go, man. I can't let that go. I know what's right now. And this is the one thing I have the virtue of, right? I'm 66 right now. I'm proud as hell to say that. I'm in great shape. I feel good, you know, and if I can't, you know, and if I can't deliver anymore, I'll know when that is. Uh, but I don't have any opinions anymore. I got examples.
Ooh.
You know,
Ooh.
so I don't have to guess as much now as things evolve. Certainly, you know, like, you know, I'm looking at Eric Renahan, I'm looking at Lauren Green at at Hawkins. You know, my mentors are younger and younger every day. I got kids that are 25 years old teaching me stuff. I'm not stopping. You know, one of the reasons I'm not, I don't want to be late to the party. I don't want to be the dumbass sitting in the room like, you know, do you have any questions? No, I don't have any questions. You know, I'm not going to be that guy. I want to say something. You know what I mean? So yeah, I'm driven. I like it. You know, I mean, people have talked a number of times about certain people being workaholics. I enjoy it. I like sitting there just reading stuff and figuring out, you know, how people are getting better and how coaches are growing and people get good jobs and they move up, and that's exciting for me. And you know, as much as I used to really enjoy talking about training, and certainly I still do, but I love people calling me up like, Coach, I just got this job offer. What do you think? You know, what's the best way to go at this? You know, there's a couple of things I thought I should ask for. I enjoy that more than anything. The fact that somebody would call me and ask me for my opinion is, you know, you can't ever take that for granted, you know, and I don't.
I mean, that's kind of what this was. It was like my way to get some advice from you, but then everybody else could listen to it. Like full disclosure, because I do like I said, I was a fanboy when I got to call in on the CVAS and I was like, I told my wife, I was like, I was on the show. Like I got to ask questions. You know what I mean? Like so you for sure have blazed that trail though, because that's why I asked about like becoming an athletic director. Like, is
Yeah,
that what you want to do? Because if you've been somebody that's pushing it forward, so I think of
yeah,
another young coach like Nick DeMarco down at Elon and what he's
yeah,
been able to do, and he's pushed the
yeah.
field forward, and he's an assistant athletic director, and how he's branded and done things for the better. Like more and more coaches, if they have those good examples, because an example that I think of is from church this past weekend where they were talking about no, it wasn't church, it was Alpha, our small group that we had on Tuesday night, where they were talking about like as long as if there's hope, like it
Yeah.
shows that there was an example of it could be done, and like so the fact that we're pushing this forward, and there are individuals like you that have done it, and there's the Nick DeMarcos, and there's the other assistant athletic directors that are pushing this thing forward, that's who we do continue to need a champion, and that's what this cheeky midweek is all about. It's we're highlighting the people in the field, so that way those younger generation have something to be like, hey, I want to do that, and like that's the whole point of all of this.
Well, I mean, I can't be more flattered. I mean, honestly, I don't know what to say to that other than it makes me feel like I'm going in the right direction. If I wasn't, then anybody could see that as a selfish, you know, effort. But none of this is about me. I've already done me, right?
Yeah.
And I want to be able to tell people like, well, here's what could happen. Not because I think it might, not because it's some sort of opinion, because it did. I seen it. I seen it with me, my friends, my colleagues. I know these things, and I want somebody to. At the same time, I want somebody to enjoy the fact that, you know, I'm in Beijing with the Olympic team. We're warming up, and you know, we're in Yankee Stadium, and Spike Lee and Billy Crystal are hanging out, you know, talking to me about, you know, the team, and just you know, Huey Lewis, Huey Lewis's drummer is in the front row He's a season ticket holder with the A's, Billy Gibson, and him and I are now great friends. I'm a big music person, and so now they come to Santa Barbara, and I go backstage, and Chicago's playing in the meantime, and I just want to go out to dinner with these guys. So we go out to me and Huey and Billy go out for dinner, and now they're going down to LA, and so we're sitting there eating dinner, and Huey's like, "So what do you guys think we should do next week? What's our song list?" And I'm like, I'm just a normal dude sitting there going, "You got to be kidding me! This is." Just those kind of things. But those things all became a product, Justin, of sports, right? Of athletics and being able to be a part of that. And so, these things can go in a lot of places, and it's just exciting to me. I'm just some normal, normal kid that had a moderate lifestyle. It was just a middle income family, and played sports and enjoyed all that, and just kind of took this avenue. And it was a classic sort of thing that I walked my resume in, walked it in, and sat it on the desk at UCLA because I was visiting Los Angeles. The guy said, "Well, we have a position open, but I don't know if it's going to be possible." I go back home, and I get a call, and we don't. It's '84. There's no cell phones or anything. So
No.
Hello, hi, this is John Arce. We have a position open. It's $10,000, but no guarantees. I'll be there. Off we go. Lived in my in-laws in a bedroom with my in-laws for almost a year before we ended up having to be able to move out and go to Rose Bowls and Fiesta Bowls and Final Eights. And I leave the year I leave, I go to the A's. The next year that team wins the national championship, and it just happens to be the year that we break the strike. So Tony says, La Russa says, "Hey, let's take the staff down and watch the game." So we come back from the strike, and we're sitting there watching the team. That it's just you just look at it. I'm like Walter Mitty. I'm like, who is this guy? It's like guy's like in a dream world.
There is no better place to end it right there. We've talked for over an hour. I greatly appreciate being able to learn from you. I know everybody else has. Thank you for everything in this conversation, and thank you, like I said, for everything that you've done for this profession and continue to do.
Wow, this was a gift. This was a gift to me, a late Christmas gift. Appreciate it.
Have a good one, brother.
All right, see you.
Congratulations on making it to the end of the video. Why don't you celebrate by watching more videos just like it? You can also help us on our quest to placate the algorithm gods by liking, sharing, subscribing, and commenting. Thank you.